Hi everyone, my name is Bianca Sanchez. I use she, her pronouns, and today I'll be presenting my research, a qualitative inquiry into Generation Z college students, social emotional well-being, and academic success through the COVID-19 pandemic, which was supervised by my mentor, Dr. Holter, and funded by the McNair Research. So to start off, the state and governmental agencies responded to COVID initially by putting in place social distancing measures and mandating masking. So here at Central, this looked like Central responding by encouraging students to move back home, moving classes from in-person to online, which drastically changed the way that students receive their education. The study rationale behind why I chose to do this research was mental health is a longstanding concern amongst college students. And so hopefully this study helps us better understand how students were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic through their social emotional well-being. So the methodology, I used a qualitative research design. I created an informed consent and a Qualtrics survey, which was sent out to multiple groups on campus. With this, the data that I collected was via Zoom through a semi-structured interview. The semi-structured interview allowed for me to, for students to interpret the questions. However, they chose to based off their experiences. So it was open-ended, which allowed for various different responses. The interviews were then transcribed and then uploaded into the NVivo software. And there I created themes based off the interviews that I will be presenting a little bit later. The participants, there was 11 participants total, age ranges between 18 to 23, and the mean age was 21. So the results. The first theme that I want to present is positive perspectives. So students in these interviews stated that they felt like Central had responded positively very quickly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which in return made them feel safe. Students also stated that it was like a breath of fresh air being able to be at home despite the pandemic going on. It gave them time to think about what the relationships meant to them, how their mental health was being impacted, as well as they eventually got used to the situation at hand. So they got used to wearing masks, they got used to being online. Another theme was challenges. So without a doubt, students faced various challenges within trying to perform academically online through a global pandemic with various responsibilities. These are students' responses that they stated. So a few of them said that their procrastination had gotten worse during their online academics, that they weren't able to perform at the level that they were used to, as well as that they didn't feel motivated to do their homework. They felt like the quality of learning had gone down and that they were just memorizing information so that they can pass their classes. Students had also stated that they didn't feel connected with their classmates or their professors online. Another theme that presented in this study was anxiety. So this was shown through the interviews, whether they stated that they had anxiety about XYZ specifically, or they insinuated that they had anxiety about an event or a situation. So students stated that they had anxiety about being around people by going out, that they had anxiety about being exposed to COVID, that their family members might be exposed to COVID, as well as they had anxiety regarding the whole pandemic as itself. They were overthinking things. They weren't able to focus during their academics because of this high tense level of anxiety. Another theme that we saw was students displaying symptoms of depression. So this looked a little different for everyone, but students stated that they weren't engaging with social interaction, that they were isolating themselves, that they weren't motivated to do the things that they loved before, that they felt lethargic and sad and trapped and alone, as well as feeling very overwhelmed and frustrated with their emotions. So they weren't able to emotionally regulate how they were feeling, as well as social interaction made them feel sluggish. They weren't really wanting to socialize with other people or their support system. Another theme that we saw was stress and trauma. So stress showed itself in various ways throughout these interviews. Students said that they felt overall more stressed than normal with their online academics, as well as just what life presented to themselves, whether they were juggling a job, they were juggling family issues, financial issues as well. They were very stressed and overwhelmed. Students also stated that they were stressed about going back into public and what that would look like post-pandemic, despite a global pandemic occurring. Another theme that we saw was socialization. So obviously with the pandemic occurring, students weren't able to socialize in the ways that they traditionally have been able to. And so this presented itself in various different ways. Students either said that they didn't like socializing with other people online, that they weren't able to connect with others online, or that they had been isolated from their family and that it was very difficult for them to be away from their family during this pandemic. And then another theme was adaptive coping mechanisms. So this was a positive aspect that came out of these interviews. Students, despite all of this difficulty and stress with academics and life, they were able to find coping mechanisms in their everyday life. And so this looked like going to the gym or spending time with their family or their dogs. Some students even stated that they went to counseling or that they were sending letters to their friends to maintain that social connection. Another theme that occurred was resilience. So students were able to adapt and overcome to the situations at hand that they were faced with. This looked like students being able to slowly overcome being online, whether that be finding resources that really helped them, using a creative outlet or expressive outlet to help them continue with their academic performance. This looked like students learning how to cope with what COVID looked like for them, as well as students stated that they've learned to look for things and find actual online resources that are credible. So this was a positive aspect that came out of these interviews. So moving on to the discussion portion of this research, previous research suggests that quality education at universities was impacted by COVID-19. This looked like at Central Washington University when CWU decided to move their in-person classes to online. Obviously, the students' academic performance and the way that they received their traditional education was impacted by that. Another research also suggests that switching to an online platform has made social and emotional connections harder. So students did express that it was difficult for them to connect with their peers online, that it was difficult for them to connect with their professors and feel like they were part of a classroom. Research also suggests that for many, the possibility of being exposed to a virus or dying from a virus or having a family member die from a virus can be seen as a potentially traumatic event. And students did express that they had anxiety or stress relating to them being exposed to COVID, their family members being exposed to COVID, and what that looked like for them. Research also suggests that prior to the pandemic, 1 in 3 college students met the criteria of at least one mental health disorders. Students in this research displayed mental health symptoms of at least anxiety or depression. And research also suggests that stress can be led to a decrease in productivity and poorer academic performance. Students stated in this study that they weren't feeling motivated to do their homework, that their academics was suffering because of it, because of in-person classes being moved to online, as well as them not having the motivation to continue with their online academics. For future recommendations, students wish to have more support, even if that's via email or Zoom. They also wished for an increase of face-to-face interaction. So some students stated that they wish professors would use the breakout rooms more often. They wish that they were able to connect with at least one other student so that they didn't feel like they were doing their academics alone and they could have some sort of support in their class. Another recommendation is to provide more avenues for mental health support resources for students to feel supported. So a few quotes that I pulled from the interviews was that students felt like faculty staff who weren't professors were more empathetic to the situation, and that they didn't really feel supported by their professors, which is an issue. Yeah. And then Another recommendation is to increase the services, the mental health services. So Central did release Wildcat Care 365, which allowed students to receive support through online services. This, however, is only limited to 12 sessions a year. So students are only able to see a counselor or a therapist once a month throughout the whole year, and not really providing more support for the students who need to see a therapist or a counselor more than once a month. Another issue with the mental health services provided here on campus is that there's not a diverse staff within the mental health service providers, and students did express that with the Wildcat Care 365, they were able to find a more diverse therapist or counselor, someone who looked like them, represented their community, and they felt more welcome towards that. So in the future, hoping that we can have more diverse faculty staff here on campus to support those students. And like I said, any other ways to increase social connection when we're doing online classes. Students preferred to have some sort of connection one way or another. So to conclude, mental health has been a longstanding concern within college students. I'm hoping that with this research, we can help better support students here on campus, whether that be talking with administration or faculty staff on how to better support Central students. Thank you.
So you mentioned qualitative research method, and for like someone who is not in the psychology field, like what does that mean, I guess?
Yeah, so a qualitative research design, basically it's very interpretive and it's very descriptive. And so it allows for the research to kind of present itself in a way that it's interpretable. So it helps us understand why or how or what is happening behind certain behaviors, if that helped. So the limitations of my study, there were a few obstacles or barriers within my study. It was difficult to find participants to even engage in this study, considering that we were still going through a pandemic and students were still doing online courses. So that was definitely a limitation, trying to find students to have the time willing enough to participate in this study. Okay.
Testing.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'll need your help today because as I was doing my research, I realized that as I was studying Hispanic serving institutions and higher education, that more and more my research was ultimately about you and about Central Washington. So as someone who, as Bianca mentioned, joined the university as a newly returning student and kind of in Zoom world, I have no monopoly on knowledge about this university, and this is very much something I could use your help answering a few questions about. So the first question I'll ask is, whom do we serve? And whom do we serve with equity? The second question I'll ask you to help me answer is, how can students belong at Central Washington, particularly first generation and low income students? And finally, what does it mean to be an authentic community? And what does it mean to be an authentic community that we can model to the rest of the world? I'm presenting my research today under my mentor, Professor Torres García, and we'll talk about a vision of Central Washington as a decolonized Hispanic serving institution. Oh, does that work? Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I like a good argument, so I'll start with a few, and you may or may not be on board with these, but let's start with a couple of ideas. First, I know we're talking a lot here about becoming a community of equity and belonging. And my argument today is that in order to be a model of this, we're not there yet. My argument is that for minoritized students particularly, that we have a lot to do to decolonize. And although we use the growth in Latinx students and the increasing diversity of the university for many purposes like fundraising and advocacy, we have not yet invested or become the kind of institution that is ready for the inevitable, which is the growth in Latinx students that will make us an Hispanic serving institution. So my argument today is, what are we doing to invest and prepare for this eventuality? And ultimately, are we doing more than we need to? Are we doing more than what the law tells us we need to do? And my argument is not that this benefits only Latinx students. My argument is that this benefits all students at Central Washington by creating a community of belonging that we'd all want to be a part of. Okay, so we have some great things developing with the mission and visions we talked about, but there were a couple of pieces of feedback that were shared that I think I really want to highlight. First, we had a number of students of color particularly speak to not feeling safe in our campus environment. And one of the reasons they don't feel they belong is a challenge with retaining and recruiting diverse faculty. And as we know, this July, we'll start doing an annual campus climate assessment. And my question before any test is sort of, how would we do before the test? And if we were to ask our Latinx students and minoritized students today, do you feel you belong? Do you feel supported? What would the answer be? And I think one of the people best prepared and positioned to answer that question is our very own Professor Torres García. And she has an upcoming study that will be published that looks at this, and we found a couple of things. First, Dr. Torres García found that there are places like TRIO where students feel well supported. It's a home in the university. However, there are decidedly mixed results when it comes to students feeling supported overall by institutions and with students knowing where to go when they don't know how to get help. And there are a few challenges that I think we all should be concerned about as we talk about equity and belonging. Notably, for Latinx students during the pandemic, Bianca had some great research on this as well. This is uniquely true where students are feeling less engaged and motivated academically. They're feeling overwhelmed, and in part because of life challenges during COVID that we have to be aware of as we support the whole student. And more importantly, we also see that we have a student who said, I feel a little less connected to my school. So what are we doing as a university to make that better? One of the things, whoops, great, there we go. Then I might have, okay, I might need your help with doing that. Okay, one of the things we're doing currently is looking at a new mission and vision. And one thing I wanted to highlight is Vice President Cleary said that equity initiatives like the current things we're doing will fail unless we address things like colonialism within our institutions. So how are we doing that here at Central? One of the ways I want to understand this is by looking at research from Professor Gina Ann Garcia of University of Pittsburgh. And she says that to decolonize institutions, we have to look at things beyond traditional measures of success. So we have to look at things like, are students feeling more confident, like Professor Torres Garcia's research indicates? Are students from community colleges, like in Yakima County, other places, are they coming here? Are they transferring? Are they graduating? Are we preparing students for work skills and certificates they would need? Also, when we talk about equity, are we empowering and liberating Latinx people with our work? And more importantly, to change our organization, are we addressing a history of colonialism? So in order to do that historical work, let's historicize a bit by looking at our capital plan. And for those of you who don't know, a capital plan is very important in a university because it is literally kind of how we invest in what we build and the bedrock, the foundation of our future. So our current capital plan identifies the growth in Latinx students as being one of two key driving assumptions. However, none of the recommendations made by Latinx communities in 2018 are included in that capital plan, despite that being used as a reason to fundraise and grow the university. Another piece of history is in 2018, we had a landmark steering committee, which had a report which said that we should make becoming an HSI the North Star of our entire university. But one of the issues addressed was faculty diversity as a real challenge. So let's look at this, a couple of these graphs. You'll see a lot of gray, and you'll also see that for the most minoritized groups like Black and Latinx professors, that is less than 6% of our current professoriate here at CWU. Sometimes I hear, hey, it's hard to get people who are talented, people of color to work and stay in the state of Washington. It is true that we are not doing much worse than other institutions in Washington, but we are far behind national averages. And I want to highlight that bar graph at the bottom. One thing that is harder to explain is why we are so overrepresented with white professors, 83% compared to the national state averages. So where does that gap play out on the ground? We see we need more Black professors to serve our Black students, but look at that gap between 18% Latinx students and 4% Latinx professors. That is a real gap. And at the bottom again, 52% versus 83%. We are not representing our students in our faculty. So this trend will only be reflected in our increasing Latinx enrollment. Over the last decade, we've more than doubled, and we've grown far beyond the national and the state averages as well at Central Washington. We know that with the increase in Latinx high school graduates, the overall enrollment in universities will increase up to 21% by 2028. There's an asterisk for 2020 and 2021 because we know during the pandemic that overall Latinx enrollment has gone down by 7% nationally and 14% in the state of Washington. If things get back to normal, we do, however, believe that trend will go up. So our demographics indicate all the same direction. Right now, we have over 1 million Latinx residents in the state. By 2030, 1.3 million. By 2040, 1.6 million, representing over 17% of the population. We are surrounded by a wealth of diversity. We have counties like Franklin County, which are over 70%, and Adams and Yakima County, over 50% Latinx. That is the communities we need to think about as we serve the state. And then when we talk about traditional measures like graduation, to be quite honest, we are not doing any better than our national averages or state averages. We need to make that better. So what are we doing in that regard? So some concepts from Latinx pedagogy that I think are really important. First, we need to make student support central. So we know programs like TRIO work because they take the entire student, all of their challenges, all of their needs, and support students with advising and mentoring that really works for Latinx students. My argument is, and Professor Garcia's argument is, that we can do that for all students. All students deserve holistic mentoring, advising, and we know that for first generation and low-income students, this is the best way for them to graduate and meet our goals. Also, as we talk about things like the diversity graduation requirement coming up in 2023, we need to center Latinx perspectives, and we need to understand that we have to build knowledge to build capacity and competency in these areas. Another really important concept is the concept of Querencia, which is a literal desire for belonging. So we're talking about places where people feel safe, where they feel they matter, and where they feel that the place matters to them the most. We also need to embrace place-based education. When we learn and when we teach, we must serve. And in communities like Yakima, like Adams, Franklin County, we must make an impact in these communities as we draw students from these communities as well. So we are doing some things at Central Washington that are promising, like the graduation requirement. We are complying with SB 5227 and have some training and some initiatives that are working in the right direction. However, if we look at our investment, and this is what we've sent to Olympia, we are hiring one full-time staff member. We are investing in one training module. But if you look at our peer institutions, we are not at the head of the pack when it comes to how much we're investing in our current diversity efforts. So what could we do? What could we do differently? I'm going to argue a few things. One, that we need to, as we come up with a strategic plan based on our mission and vision, we must have an explicit commitment to becoming an HSI in that to accomplish those goals for equity and belonging. We need to fund programs that are doing the heavy lift on campus for diversity, that will be doing a lot of the work we require to meet these goals. And we need to give all students the opportunity to be mentored and advised in a way that is holistic and addresses the life challenges that we see right now during COVID that Bianca talked about as well. We need faculty diversity and empowerment of that diversity to retain that faculty. And finally, we need to address whiteness and colonialism in our institutions and our curriculum and have a decolonized, decentered, and ultimately perspective that comes from people who are colonized, like Latinx people, in our curriculum, in our teaching, in our curriculum for all students. So let's go back to those questions we talked about before. Whom do we serve equitably? How can first-generation low-income students feel they belong here at Central? And finally, what does it mean to be an authentic community model? How do we come at this authentically? So I'm going to argue that, to wrap up, that we need to create a community of belonging and equity through concepts like Querencia. We need to have a place where students organically feel they belong, where their whole selves are welcomed, and where we have a decolonized institution where students are centered in their perspectives. We need to support all students holistically, and we need a faculty that looks like and represents our student populations. We need to serve our communities. We cannot draw and recruit communities that we don't serve effectively. And finally, we need to invest and prepare to be the model four-year Washington HSI. We have the opportunity to be the first, but to be a model community of equity and belonging, we need to prepare, we need to invest, and most importantly, we need to understand that we have to center perspectives of students who are not yet the model of equity and belonging, who are not yet centered, and who do not feel they are a part of a campus climate that is welcoming, where they fully belong. And my argument today is sort of a call for action. My research led me to an argument, and my argument is we can do more. So my argument today is if we center becoming an HSI, Central Washington will be a better place for all students, and all students will be able to pursue the goals that we have as a university more successfully. Thank you. Added a few words there. I have an appendix, and all of you have printouts, but if you have any questions, I welcome them. But there's more there about different funding priorities and different things that we could do as well that give you more background detail. So thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a great question. Without knowing the fall 2021 enrollment data, which isn't public yet with the National Center for Education Statistics, I think even within a couple of years, that's a real likelihood. Eastern Washington has studied this, and they've projected by 2025, they anticipate being an HSI at the latest. We're probably right on par with them demographically. I think we should prepare to be one by 2024, 2025 at the latest. Yeah. 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 Yeah, great question. I know that's a challenging thing because enrollment and particularly in the pandemic, these things are really challenging. I know Central has borne out that storm a little better than other institutions. And particularly one thing I've heard in some of the feedback as well from the forums was we are hiring professors of color. We're not retaining them as well as we could. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge. Yeah. 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 Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a great question. All of my data was looking at tenure or tenure track, but I agree with you that one part of the difficult thing I understand, I'm not an academic professionally, but I understand that one challenge is that for talented scholars of color, there are a lot of responsibilities given to them by university. So there are people who are not even tenure track who are doing diversity programs or leading things that are far beyond what we'd expect of other lecturers. So Professor García at Pittsburgh looks at the ways in which any scholars of color are asked to do far more than many of their colleagues, which is a retention issue. But to your point, that only matters if we know these people will stay and if we know that they can impact students for the long term. That happens if they're tenure or tenure track. I agree with you. Yes. What recognition would I give to the? Yeah. Yeah, great question. This is a very complicated thing that I'm sure many people have thought much about. I think ultimately, if we make this a core part of our strategic plan, all of our efforts around promotion, around diversity, around giving faculty members of color resources to manage their many commitments, these are all things we can do that Professor García talks about in her research. But I think it has to happen first with a university-wide commitment to these goals so that it isn't ancillary to the work, it's central. Does that make sense? Yep. Oh, thank you so much.
All right, welcome to the Council of Investor Responsibility year-end presentation. I'm Davyn Cox.
I'm Kameron Egg.
Glenn McKee.
Magnusson Mussard.
Tenerelli.
And I'm Derek Zinn.
So let's look at our agenda for today. First, we're going to start with an introduction to CIR in this year's work, an introduction to ISS ESG scores, an explanation of our research process, results of our research, the potential impact of ESG policies on your investments, ESG policy comparisons among educational institutions, and policy suggestions for Central Washington University. So what is the CIR? The Central Washington University Council of Investor Responsibility is a group that advises the university through the office of the CFO concerning environmental, social, and governance concerns. We are the student subset of that council, and we do the analysis every year for those concerns.
So what is ESG investing? What are ESG scores? What is ESG? ESG investing was created as a way for investors to judge companies off their social responsibility and invest in the ones that do the best. ESG stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. An example of environmental issues could be like carbon emissions, or pretty much just the overall impact the company has on the environment. Social issues could be anything from how a company treats their workers to practices and basically just their impacts on the overall kind of climate. And then governance is the overall management of the company. Is this being done in a sustainable way, basically? And what's really cool is about ISS is they basically take these ways of ESG and put them into scores. They use thousands of different metrics and give us thousands of different scores. We focus mainly on environmental, social, and then an overall score. And like I said earlier, they use thousands of different metrics. They use industry specific metrics. So one example that we like to use is for like the automobile industry. Environmental issues are going to have more of an impact on that overall score, more of a weight than if you go over to a company like Twitter or Facebook, where, you know, like the social part of it is going to have be more heavily weighted in their overall score. And then moving forward, we also use Capital IQ and CRIS for all of our financial data. And then, yeah, ISS for our ESG scores. And then I'm going to pass it off to Davyn here.
So to join, clean, and shape the data, we used a combination of Python and R, primarily because certain students were more familiar with Python and others were more familiar with R, so this allowed us to better split the work up. In Python, we primarily used the pandas library for the data analysis and cleaning. Once the data was in its final form, we used the machine learning library scikit-learn to run linear regressions on the data for each industry. And finally, we used the matplotlib library to plot the regressions. We analyzed data from 24 global industry groups in order to get a better understanding of how each industry group reacted differently between ESG scores and Sharpe ratios.
Alrighty, so what is a Sharpe ratio? The Sharpe ratio was developed by William F. Sharpe to compare the differences in a portfolio's risks, returns, and potential risks it's undertaking in its investment. The correlation between risks and return is such that a higher risk necessitates a higher return to justify that risk. When looking at Sharpe ratios, a Sharpe ratio of 0.5 demonstrates that a company carries half the volatility and thus half the potential return historic returns. Next, we'll be passing to Kameron to do the data analysis.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the presentation so far. So here we have our results from our data analysis. We ran 23 individual linear regressions. We know there's 24 industry groups. Unfortunately, we didn't have data on one of those industry groups, so we had to drop it. If you look to the left column, we have divided these by significant and insignificant. You'll notice that there are 3 significant industry groups. If you look at the F-stat and F-critical, we find that there is a significant F-stat as well as a significant p-value, suggesting there is a relationship in these 3 industry groups between the independent variable of ESG scores and the dependent variable of Sharpe ratios. Now, if you look at the other left-hand column of insignificant, these 5 industry groups are indicative of the larger sample size, which we didn't include given how hefty the data was. But for the most part, we found that there was not a relationship between ESG scores and the Sharpe ratio in almost all the industries. And I want to clarify even further, commercial and professional services and technology and hardware equipment had a negative relationship between ESG scores and Sharpe ratio, meaning that a higher ESG score in these industries led to a lower Sharpe ratio. In consumer durables and apparel, we found that a higher ESG score led to an improved Sharpe ratio. Passing it off to Davyn.
Thank you, Kameron. So here we have 2 plots of the regressions. On the left side, we can see the commercial and professional services industry, which saw a marginally negative correlation between ESG rating and Sharpe ratio. On the right side, we can see the durables and apparel industry, which saw a marginally positive relationship between ESG rating and Sharpe ratio. As you can see, the ESG rating is on the x-axis and the Sharpe ratio is on the y-axis. A higher ESG rating, meaning a higher Sharpe ratio, means a positive correlation.
Thank you. So to support some of our research, we conducted an in-depth literature review. Through this, we found that companies who carry a higher ESG score also carry a lower long-term risk, since ESG is pretty good at capturing some long-term risk factors. It is also discovered that, excuse me. My bad, Cameron.
You're doing great. Further, we use a meta-analysis as part of our literature review. The meta-analysis of 2,200 empirical studies found that 90% of the studies found no relationship between returns and ESG scores. As the financial literature has suggested, there is also a relationship between risk and return. And so in our analysis, we found that there was no relationship between ESG scores and risk and return, which is in line with prior literature.
We did some research for the most commonly used investment policies and found out that some of them were ESG principles will be used to guide investments. The portfolio will be monitored by an on-campus group. Try to avoid investing in companies that are involved in the violation of human rights, and try to invest in companies that provide positive social and environmental impact. Some policy suggestions for the CWU investment policy statement are actively integrate ESG concerns into our investment process, divestment and holding consisting of tobacco and fossil fuels, and establish the continual presence of the CIR.
Further, we'd like to expand our analysis in next year's analysis. We are a subgroup that does annual analysis of concerns with regard to ESG in the portfolio. We'd like to include our sample size. Further, we'd like to assess the relationship between ESG and the school's bonds. We only looked at the stock mix this year. We don't have data yet on the bonds, but because we do know that ESG companies typically take on less risk, that might be appropriate to look at that in the bonds market.
We would also like to draft a sustainable investment policy using our analysis.
And moving forward, we'd also like to bring in additional stakeholders and experts. Yeah, the more people we can have involved in this, the better. Like we said, we're just a student subgroup. There's a much larger kind of group together of us. And we'd like to collaborate with more groups on campus. We've had one group approach us about a possible divestment of palm oil, but the more active we can be with groups around campus, the better. So before we get into Q&A, just kind of wanted to conclude everything. Basically, what we found is that ESG scores don't have any sort of statistical significance in the Sharpe ratio. And with that, we'd like to open it up. Any questions you guys have?
All right, so coming into this, our main hypothesis for any one industry group was that apparels would have a positive relationship, a significant one, with the Sharpe ratio and ESG scores. In recent years, the practices of apparel companies has been in the spotlight, especially in regards to child slavery. So we definitely had a hypothesis that there would be a significant relationship there based on consumers actively boycotting companies that engage in these practices. As for how this impacts the school's portfolio, we do know that in these three industries, if we are able to perform this analysis again on with a bigger sample size, because the financial market is so big, a sample size of 50 is a good starting spot. But if we were able to do this and reproduce the results, we would be able to create ESG policy in the school's investment policy. They have a set of criteria they have to meet when they make an investment. We'd be able to add a criteria to that investing policy that in one specific industry, we do require them to meet a certain ESG goal, given that there is a positive relationship. Thank you. Does that satisfy your question? Thank you. Any other questions? You want the mic? I can bring you the mic. Is that allowed? Let's give him the mic.
How would you, or how long do you think U.S. companies have been using ESG, like on a average overall?
So ESG is a metric that measures the sustainability practices of any one given company. As of recent, ESG investing has become popular amongst consumer investors, such as the average person, such as us. Given that companies have felt the pressure to disclose these ESG scores for the first time, but that is more of a recent thing. There are traditionally large cap companies that have been producing these ESG scores for a longer period of time. For existence, Apple and Dell have been reporting these scores since 2014. But now that consumers are looking to invest in ESG options, there's more pressure amongst small cap companies, and more small cap is the best word I can describe it, to disclose these scores for the first time. So in 2021, we saw about 2,000 new companies disclose their ESG scores to the ISS database. As a result of companies disclosing their scores for the first time, their scores are going to be relatively lower because they have not been trying to improve these practices. So the overall ISS database found that the average ESG score for each industry group was lower in 2021 as a result of these new disclosures. But this is a relatively new thing that we are going to begin to see expand within financial analysis. Any other questions? Yeah, so we took the Sharpe ratio was based off daily returns going back to 2001. So we had a considerably large sample size. As for the ESG scores, it's variable because companies disclose or begin disclosing ESG scores at different time periods. Also, when a company goes out of business, they no longer disclose their ESG scores. So we also have to account for that. And that's why our sample size through time was diminished. We originally started with about 6,000 companies. And by the time we got done with our analysis, our sample size had shrunk to 1,700. So it is in the best interest of proving our results in the future to expand our sample size to see if these results hold true. We are. So these are, the sample size is 56 companies within commercial and professional services. Any other questions? You guys have any last words? Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed.
Oh, we're at the stand up this side to the camera. Further over right here. 5 minutes. Give you that green card and get it still yellow and red. That's out of time at that point. So sound good? I'll introduce you. Get started. All right, so it's kind of give an outline of our presentation. So kind of go over the motivation for our project and looking at kind of some research questions related to the project and kind of the two core elements of our project, namely job placement of CWU econ graduates, as well as evaluating trends in the US labor market, and then kind of end off, we'll reach some conclusions and kind of help us limitations and potential for future work. So kind of go through some motivations is that in April 2021, an event dubbed the Great Resignation began, where we saw elevated quit rates among workers across the US. And these quit rates continued to stay elevated throughout the year of 2021 and also kind of reach other peaks in September and November 2021. And then we also wanted to investigate labor supply decisions of CWU econ grads to estimate the potential effects of the Great Resignation on their job placement. And so kind of some research questions. So we wanted to look at who are the largest employers of CWU econ grads, and also kind of look using quit rates and employment rates to analyze the effects of the Great Resignation on the industries which employ CWU grads.
All right. So when we looked at econ grads, we looked at our alumni who graduated from 2017 to 2021, specifically in the economics field. Then we, to collect the data, we looked at their LinkedIn. We pulled the data from their LinkedIn from late March to early April, so we do not have data from the past month or so. When we go into year proportions, everything has been fairly proportional. There's been a bit of dip in 2019, but hasn't been statistically significant to count either way. So this is the gender proportion of CWU students. As you can see, it is predominantly, econ graduates of CWU students. As you can see, it's mostly predominantly male. We've also seen that this is not much of a difference from the general field as a whole. But what we do see with CWU students is that about 1/6 of them go out of state, while the other 5/6 stay around within the state itself. Most of the other places that they go have been within the country. With our data and sample size, we have not seen any people go out of the country. Within Washington itself, we have found that a lot of our employed jobs come from King County itself at about 42%. Next is Yakima at about 18% of the students being employed there, and then Kittitas at 9%. Thurston and Pierce are also notable, staying around 6 to 7%. But in general, King County is where most students are being employed. So for where graduates find jobs and where they're employed, a bunch are finding jobs in finance and insurance, mostly in credit unions and banks. Next, we have manufacturing jobs, which has mostly been due to Boeing, which CWU has a lot of partnerships and a bunch of opportunities with Boeing itself. We also found that a lot of people were going into professional and business services.
All right. So I kind of want to start unpacking the Great Resignation. So to kind of get our data, we used data from the BLS Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, also known as JOLT, as well as the Current Population Survey, also known as the CPS, and to analyze these changes in the labor supply in the months surrounding COVID-19 pandemic. And then more specifically, we kind of cut down the date range to June 2019 to March 2022 to analyze the trends in the quit and unemployment rates of the US. And we're also kind of focusing mainly on industries that employ CWU econ grads. And then we also looked at, for demographics, gender and age. And the age is kind of split up to age 20 to 30, which is roughly for the econ grad age range. And then prime age, which is workers 24 to 54. And then workers age 55 and older. So this first one's kind of looking at quit rates and hiring rates. And so we see that big spike that's in May, which is the month preceding kind of the big layoff caused by COVID, because it was, because the lockdowns and stuff kind of uplifted then. And so we see those are elevated throughout. And then more specifically, the quit rates is that we, there's kind of a dip because of the pandemic, and then they kind of pick up and up and up as time goes on. And then in November, which is the first of those two that are at the highest level, November 2021, is kind of when the last big spike that we have recorded. And then obviously currently both of the trends are above what their pre-pandemic levels were. And then since we mentioned November 2021 so much, we kind of wanted to analyze how it compared to the previous Novembers in 2019 and 2020. And then also looking at different industries. And these industries are derived from the SIC codes. It goes up to 6 digits, but we just stuck with 2 digits for our classifications. And so some of the industries to highlight, so we see manufacturing, it's been picking up in 2021, it was elevated. Retail trade was elevated. Education, health services, leisure and hospitality, professional business services. Yeah. And so unfortunately, a lot of the quit rates, they don't do demographic data. So we'll be just using unemployment data from now on. And so with this one is that we see that big spike, that's the April 2021, the big kind of lockdowns and a bunch of the firings and layoffs. And then as time goes on, they work down. But the kind of the big point with the turn down is that this term comes called the she session, which is where there are elevated rates among female workers, primarily because they're the main kind of caretakers of children and of ailing relatives. And then after, and then there's just also kind of some seasonality going on because after the big kind of spike done is they kind of during the winter season as female rates unemployment were lower, and they kind of picked up in the summertime and then kind of back and forth. And then so this is kind of looking at across industries. And so we see that in both like econ grads and also wholesale, mainly wholesale because it was over 25% unemployment at the peak. And we see the big spike in also wholesale, but also retail, and then in manufacturing. And then more specifically later on around April 2021, we're seeing kind of some pickups because retail has always kind of remained a little bit higher, but there was a little pickup in that region. We also see pickups in wholesale and manufacturing and whatnot. And just kind of wanted to break down more specifically in manufacturing and professional business services. So we cut down the date range further to kind of get that pandemic spiked so that way we can see like the actual changes in the unemployment rates. And so in manufacturing is the first kind of picked up in March 2021 for females, and that kind of subsided. And then males kind of that April time span started to pick up. And as with the total kind of numbers, is it more tracked with males because it's a more of a male-dominated industry. And then in professional business services, it had a little bit of a later uptick in about June to July, and it was largely female-driven, and then it kind of abated quickly soon after. And then this is kind of breaking down the age ranges. And so the area I really want to focus on is on this green one, which is what the age range roughly of our econ grads. And also something to note too is that I mentioned workers 55 plus, but when we were doing the statistical analysis, is they tracked really well with the base rate. So a lot of, since those workers are the main workforce, they track really well with that. In the case of the green here, our prime age, or not the prime age with the 20 to 30 workers, is it's always been relatively elevated, and they saw the biggest hit during the pandemic spike in both male and female. And they've also maintained a much greater kind of gap between them and the other rates. Specifically among male during this 2021, we saw much higher rates in unemployment among younger males. And there's also kind of the late peak in about November, December, January, like around when that spike hit. And so kind of look at some results and some conclusions. Not all industries saw the increase in quit rates during 2021. Also that 30% of our econ grads are employed in the finance and insurance industry, which saw little to no change in quit rates during 2021. And then however, approximately 34% of our sample have jobs in manufacturing and professional business services, which did experience increased quit rates and unemployment during 2021. And generally, like among economics, higher quit and unemployment rates are an indication of tight labor markets, which has been a big thing that's been talked about just the last few months. And these may result in higher wages and changes to the current working condition. And then these increases in employment were largest among young unmarried male workers. And so kind of some limitations in future work. The biggest limitation for looking at CWU grads is just how small our sample size was. And we'll need to continue to track our graduates, just kind of see how that changes over time, as more people graduate. And also we need to identify and create partnerships with the employers, creating internship opportunities to increase job match, kind of what we have with Boeing, because there's so much kind of back and forth there. And then for unemployment data, the Great Resignation is still ongoing. So like, for example, our March data is preliminary. And so they will update that, like there'll be little changes over time. And so stuff is going to continue to happen. So like conclusions are kind of hard to reach when you're still getting stuff being released. Thank you. Are there any questions? Slides back. I don't know off the top of my head. We were kind of messing around with it. It's just sometimes with the industry codes is trying to like figure out specifically like where everything lies because yes. Yeah. Yeah, and it can be kind of hard to determine too, is because with the tight labor market, people are quitting, but they're immediately finding new jobs just because of just how, once again, how tight it is. And so it can be kind of hard to like bear it out in unemployment numbers. Yes. That's because like the big job loss and lockdowns are in April 2020. And then they were almost uplifted in May. And so like we saw this big scramble to like kind of replace all those jobs that have been lost during the like the peak of like the lockdown push of the pandemic. It just kind of could be like a delayed effect as people re-enter the workforce. Just because with, for example, among female workers with having to take care of kids because of online schooling, they may have been delayed. We also saw during like the recession, 10 plus years ago as people went back to school. So there's just probably a lot of factors that kind of delayed and people have just kind of trickling back in to labor market. And so that's why hires are still kind of increasing. Obviously with higher pay too, kind of coaxing people back in that may not have been as inclined to return.
Well, you know me as Kameron already.
And my name is Betty Middlestead.
And we're going to get into the abstract of our analysis. So as our relationship with the climate crisis continues to develop, we know this is going to have an impact on gas prices. So we thought it'd be most appropriate to look into alternative transportation models to Central Washington as well as Ellensburg. Our proposed solution for electric busing includes the concepts of investing in electric buses, improved ongoing data collection, and flexible route adjustments. All of these solutions are mutually independent, but we're prioritizing our focus on investment in electric buses through a cost-benefit analysis. Further, our cost-benefit analysis largely includes sunk costs of infrastructure. The largest part of the infrastructure costs in electric busing is the charging facilities themselves. They can run a total of upwards of tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the company you go with and the quality of charger. Further, we have a variable cost such as fuel and maintenance. The fuel is directly related to the climate crisis. Even more, we have our fixed cost, which is depreciation. And our benefits from this analysis will be fuel cost reduction and reduced carbon emissions.
So let's get into the bus financing. We decided to go with the company BYD, which is a US-based company producing electric busing. And we decided to go with the 7KM, which is their smallest bus, and a municipal lease. We talked to a salesman who told us that the municipal lease is the one to use in our case. And they gave us average numbers from their customers that the customers are currently paying. So we would work with an average annual percentage rate of 3.25, and we would not require a down payment for this. So with the average payment of $5,000 a month and the interest of 3.25% and over a 12-year period, we would be paying around $720,000 for the vehicle. And with a $1 residual at the end of that 12-year period, we would be able to own the vehicle. And with that comes maintenance costs of about 24 cents per mile. Now, we were not able to get a breakdown of what the maintenance costs are exactly. We do know that the battery has a 12-year warranty, which is a pretty good deal since that's usually the most expensive part to replace on an electric vehicle. But over the 12-year period, including the payments, interest, and maintenance, we would look at about $786,000 for the electric vehicle. Now, if we're looking at the Ford E450 that the public transit in Ellensburg is currently operating with, if we were to buy a new 2022 vehicle with also a 12-year lease, we would be looking at about $95,900 for the price. Now, this was really hard to get a quote. As we all know, there's a shortage of vehicles. It's super hard to get any vehicles right now. And this quote is from a vendor in Illinois. We were also assuming an average annual percentage rate of 8.5% and a down payment of 10%. These are assumptions that we made. But with that being said, we would be looking at around $141,000 over the 12-year period for the vehicle cost. And maintenance, again, it was really hard to find any data on it. So we kind of looked through the internet to find good assumptions on what the maintenance cost would be. Over a 10-year period, we would be looking at around $15,000 for just normal maintenance like oil changes. And then for major repair costs, we had a nice little table that's also graphed up here that shows major costs with the probability throughout the 12-year lifetime. And we would be looking at around an average of $9,000. But as you can see, after 10 years of operating the vehicle, the probability of running into major costs spikes up exponentially. And including the interest payment and the maintenance cost, we would be looking at around $170,000 for the Ford. Now, when we compare these costs of the two vehicles, we have to look at the capacity. The capacity is a lot different between the Ford and the K7M. We have only 13 seats with the Ford and 22 seats with the K7M. So because of that, we decided to not increase the overall capacity, but rather decrease the number of vehicles we would be operating if we were to switch to the electric vehicles. And to calculate our fuel costs, we took the miles per gallon that the Central Transit reported in 2018. They had an average miles per gallon of 4.2 for the Ford E450, which is horrendous. So we see a huge difference in the fuel costs for the K7M and the E450. That being said, we took into account the capacity difference and the vehicles or the number of vehicles we would need to operate to have about the same capacity. That gives us a cost per seat of around $40,000 for the Ford, around $36,000 for the K7M. So there's not a huge difference. But since we would be operating less buses, we would also need less labor for drivers. And that makes a difference between $5.5 million for the Ford and $4.7 million for the K7M. And here's just a quick cost overview of what the cost for one vehicle pretty much consists out of. And as you can see, both of them are mainly just the labor cost that goes into it. But with the Ford E450, we have a huge chunk as fuel cost, and gasoline prices have been fluctuating a lot. We're not sure where the prices are going to go. There is political conflicts that play a role in this as well. And so with the K7M, we would not have that problem as the fuel cost is very minimal.
Our assumptions limitations. We are assuming that inflation is anchored at 2%. As such, fuel prices are expected to rise 2% per year. As we mentioned, the volatility of fuel prices is really high right now with geopolitical conflicts going on. We have no for sure way of forecasting fuel prices into the future. So that is something that should be considered when looking at alternative transportation models. Further, the lack of data from central transit and manufacturers made it really hard to calculate maintenance costs. Electric buses are new innovative technology and require a different skill set. Oftentimes this skill set requires somewhat of higher level education, at least in AA. As a result, the labor cost is significantly higher to a degree in terms of per hour. So that results in a slightly higher maintenance cost for electric buses over the long run. Rider turnout is not included in the cost comparison because Central Washington University dishes a quarterly amount to Central Transit. The reason we do this is that every student, as a result of paying a small fee to the school, gets to ride the buses for free each year. So that's why we did not take that into account. Further, the inability to control for capacity size was a limitation. We were able to circumvent this by justifying the increase in seat size for the BYD K7M. And as a result, we chose to go with 4 buses versus a 6-to-6 comparison, which would have been completely equal, but that would have left for a discrepancy in the total seat capacity.
So we wanted to have a little bit of an open discussion about this as well, since we have been running into open-ended questions a lot, just due to the lack of data. Unfortunately, Central Transit hasn't been cooperating as well with us. But overall, we think that yes, when just looking at the costs, it might save some money, but that's kind of a trade-off with efficiency as well, because operating 4 vehicles instead of 6 will affect the routes. We won't be able to have smaller routes or have buses drive like both ways. So it's not really a great solution in our eyes, but something that would be nice to look at is maybe hybrid models. And as far as we know, that Central Transit has been looking into hybrid models as well. And that's probably a better solution than going full electric.
Yeah, I think the point we made here is that there is a viable way to do electric busing in Ellensburg, but it comes with limitations as to how it can be applied. Questions? The representative from BYD suggested this bus could go a full day on a single charge, and that charging would occur overnight. And given the geographic terrain of Ellensburg and how it's mostly flat, that would be most optimal for this electric bus, considering it's not like Seattle, it's going up and down hills. For that reason, Seattle implements hybrid buses. That way, when they're going down hills, they can recharge the battery. But by using diesel in Seattle, they're able to circumvent that issue of the geographic terrain. But they would be able to charge it overnight. As for the infrastructure for the charging stations, that is to be decided. Whether the city wants to cooperate with maybe a private partner to get a government-private business relationship going, or if the city wants to absorb this cost entirely themselves. If we were to outsource this to a private business, they could also source these chargers out to other industry services around the city. So that's one way of splitting the cost up and diversifying it amongst stakeholders within the city.
So yes, yeah. So we were kind of like on the fence about how we would be handling it because electricity prices have not been fluctuating the same as gasoline prices. And gasoline prices are fairly hard to forecast. So we try to simplify it as much as possible in that way, to go with a steady 2% inflation, since that's kind of like the goal inflation for the nation. Yeah, it was more of a simplification in that case, just because we weren't sure how to properly forecast the gasoline prices.
If I could add on to that, we don't know how long this inflation is going to manifest in the way it is. And because of that, forecasting with the current volatility in the inflation, what perhaps would give us a different result that might not be representative of the reality. So if we were to forecast higher inflation prices for gas prices, that might make gas vehicles look very non-optimal, but that might not be the entirety depending on how long our situation lasts. So we don't want to create a perception of a reality that might not entirely be true, but it also potentially could be true in the future. So to avoid that, we just went with a simple anchored 2% inflation rate.
Yes, yeah. Yes, so the data that we used were from, again, so the Central Transit report, the last report that they published was from 2018. So it's also a little outdated, but they have an overall labor cost, just the total that they spend, and then the amount of employees that they have. We were able to find what the drivers are being paid by the hour. So we used that to calculate with if they were to work full time. That's what we used for our labor costs. And this is for all vehicles over a 12-year period. Yes. So the interest rate for the electric bus was given to us. This one was not given to us. We asked, I think, also Hope Source, but they were paying and we didn't really get a response. So we searched what like the average is that cities pay for their leases. And that's what we came up with.
Our rep, Jason from BYD, they trust the credit of our institution, so they're willing to give us a lower interest rate. Any more questions? Thank you, guys.
Oh, there we go.
sure you use the mic, and if you could ask a question, that would be wonderful too, because that way they're heard, because otherwise it doesn't get picked up for the people that are on the Zoom.
Got it. Hello, testing. Nice. Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Briley Walker. This is Leah Ingold. Unfortunately, we had two other cohorts on this presentation here, but they moved on. They're now working down in Fresno and Hillsborough, respectively. But they're here in spirit. We miss them, but that's okay. So basically what we're talking about here is 2027's joint NCAA Final Four tournament for the men's and women's. There are a rampant number of Title IX inequities present even today in men's and women's collegiate sports, and it's pictured very starkly in specifically basketball, the two tournaments that are going on side by side, so you can really see the discrepancies that are present. And having a joint 2027 Final Four, this will allow for everything to be of equal status because they will be in the same city, utilizing the same hotels, and hopefully all the same amenities as well. In 2021, there was a couple athletes that took action and they posted these discrepancies. We can see here on your right, or on the far side there, you can see that these are the facilities that the men's teams were privy to, whereas the women's teams for training, they only had this set of dumbbells for their entire team to work with. This is very different. As you can see, the food as well, men's, they get a whole smorgasbord of options, whereas the women's, very limited, and it doesn't look that great either. So what we're trying to do is allow all those great options for facilities, training, food, transportation, and accommodation, all of that to be available to everyone that's participating, not just the men's teams.
So here we have the logo. We really wanted to capture kind of what Indianapolis is about. So in the back, we have the skyline with Indianapolis in the middle, just in case people don't know. They're also known for the Indy 500. So we wanted to touch on that in the back with the checkered flag. In the name of equality and inclusivity, we wanted to make sure that we had both a woman and male statue, along with the 4 stars on each side that will represent the 8 teams going to the Final Four. And then of course on the bottom is just the date with the title of it. So the Final Four for the NCAA. With the schedule, those that are in asterisks are going to be at the Convention Center in Indiana, of course. And then those without will be at Lucas Oil Stadium. So there's going to be 4 courts at the Convention Center, more than enough for the teams that will be there. We also wanted to make sure that teams will be provided for them. So that's one less thing that they need to stress about. And that'll be provided at their Marriott hotels. Ticket release will start Saturday, October 24th to 2026 at 11 a.m. to make sure that everyone is privy to the sales coming up. So of course it is going to be in March. Tickets will proceed to get more expensive, but just making sure that we have that early release going on because this is an event in America that many people like to go to. As well as we want to make sure that each male and women, man and women have a game going on during prime time. So games will start Saturday at 5 p.m. Excuse me, and proceed to Sunday.
But just making sure that they have both a 5 and 8 p.m. slot going on, just so that, some people, they like to watch television later on in the day. They might not know that this tournament is going on. They turn to the screen at 5 p.m. Oh, great. They turn to the screen at 8 p.m. Great, another game. They both have the chance to see, or they have the chance to see both the women's and men's game. So for health and safety, it's really important, especially with collegiate athletes. We want to make sure that we have the best of the best. So the NCAA Chief Medical Officer, Brian Hainland, he's been with the NCAA for quite a while, so he knows his stuff. There's also going to be 2 to 3 standby medical specialists around the games for the men and women to make sure that if there's anything outside of the training staff's needs, they can attend to that. And then also each team is responsible for bringing their own training staff or athletic trainer. They know their athletes the best. And so if the medical specialists need to see to them or their injuries, they're able to connect with the athlete better. For quality of officials, we haven't seen many women's officiating staff with male basketball games in general. So we just wanted to make sure that when we're presenting a male and female tournament, that's also represented in the officiating staff. So the national coordinator of men's basketball officiating and the national coordinator of women's basketball officiating will select their top crew. Both will have equal amounts of female and male officiating staffs. And then along with that, we want to make sure that their pay is also represented equally.
So moving on to facilities, we're quite thankful that Lucas Oil Stadium is a rather large complex and houses 7 total locker rooms. So this is going to be really great to where we can have 2 set aside for the teams playing on each day. So both sides, so 4 in total, 2 men's, 2 women's locker rooms, 1 for each team that's playing for the day. Then we'll have 2 set aside for the officials, since we're hoping that we can get equal amount of male and female officials, sorry. So then we can have 1 for each of them, and then we can have another one on standby. We'll have that last 7th one be for any practice team that wants to come in that's scheduled during the time of the day. As far as our travel and accommodations, we will be utilizing the main sponsors of the NCAA for most of this. As you can see here, there's stuff like Buffalo Wild Wings, Coca-Cola for food and beverage products. We'll utilize that for a lot of the meals or refreshments, have Powerade like rampant around the whole tournament. As far as transportation goes, we'll be using the Nissan vans, another strong supporter of the NCAA. And this will allow the teams to travel to and from their hotels to the game locations. And then gifts, mementos. This was a very big difference between the men's and women's in prior years. So it's large importance for us moving forward that they are exactly the same, varying only in toiletry items, because men and women need different toiletries. But aside from that, it's going to be exactly the same, equal everything. So that's what we're hoping for. And then for the signage, promotions, and branding. All right, so we're going to be promoting unity and duality throughout the entirety of the tournament. All of our social media posts will have the hashtag like one tournament or the combined tournament, joint tournament, something like that, so that we can utilize that. And all of our company sponsors will be spreading that around throughout their commercials as well. And for entertainment, we're just going to make sure that they all have access to the same amenities like Hulu, Netflix, all at their hotel room, all based on us. And then we'll have various tours available to every single individual and every team, no matter gender or if they get booted out early or something like that.
So Briley kind of touched on it with the sponsors. So corporate sponsors and corporate partners are going to be available for men's and women's. It'll all be the same. across the board. And then both with our ads on social media and television, we're going to have men and women being presented in that. So we had to choose three activation strategies for this production. The first one is going to be with AT&T. Really similar with March Madness in the past. We're just tweaking a couple different things. So it's going to be an experience between AT&T and LG with the official hotspot of March Madness. So it's going to be anywhere in the stadium and at the block party experience. There's going to be a hotspot that people can connect to. It's also going to be kind of a music festival. We want it to be a place where people can get that tailgating experience as well. Just something to connect them more with basketball and kind of the message we're trying to send across with duality and unity. Also inclusivity as well. And then each sponsor activation needs a trendy hashtag. Ours is going to be unifying our world, making it really easy for people to connect if they're not able to. So on social media, all those, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. The second one's going to be with Coca-Cola. Again, not new to the connection with March Madness. Our hashtag for this is going to be Open Madness. So in the past, it was Open Happiness. We're just wanting to tweak it in our own way, making sure that people can connect it with March Madness as well. So Open Madness. Powerade will be the official sports drink of the tournament. So we're also going to have that with the teams down on the courts, in their swag bags, anything and everything that can account for sports drinks. Powerade has their name on it. And then only Coke products will be sold for March Madness vendors, including at the hotspot. They have a lot to choose from. We want to make it simple. We want to make it connected with the people. Everyone knows Coca-Cola products, so just making it equal in that sense. The third one is going to be Capital One. Again, last but definitely not least, they're still connected to March Madness. They have this bracket challenge, so we just want to make sure that we're keeping with that. And then fans will obviously get discounts. So the 10% on their tickets, the 5% cash back on the Capital One Venture card. And we want to make sure that we kind of connect collegiate athletics with professional athletics, kind of gain a little bit more attention with that. So everyone loves Sue Bird, go Seattle. And then Chris Paul as well. In the commercials, we're going to try and get them at the tournament as well. Of course, they'll want to see that, probably trying to promote their own collegiate teams. And then brand signage for all sponsors are going to be displayed around the event. So like how we're doing with Powerade bottles in their swag bags and on the courts. We're also going to have, like Riley said, Buffalo Wild Wings. That's going to be presented in the stadium as well.
All right, so here we have our finances outlook. We utilized numbers from the 2019 tournament, which was the last really normal tournament we could pull numbers from. COVID-19 had a great impact on both the 2020 and 2021 tournaments, so we couldn't really utilize those numbers moving forward. Obviously, things are probably going to increase as time goes on and things return back to some sense of normalcy, but we utilized both the men's and women's tournament totals, added those together, and then there are 5 rounds of the tournament. So then we divided that number by 5 to come up with all of these figures you see before you. And with combining the tournaments, you can see that we'll still get about $185 million profit in just the final 4. That's about it. So thank you guys. Any questions? Oh, nice, sweet. Yeah. Any questions? None? All right. Sweet. Yeah. Yeah, so this was an assignment that we actually applied to get in for what's called an asthma conference down in Indianapolis. So we got
Athletic Applied Sport Management Association. Thank you. We were honored to be able to fly down there with our other teammates, and we got to compete in a little competition where we presented our findings and our plan and pretty much our overall bid proposal for it. But yeah. Anyone else? All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Shake Shack stock analysis. Presenter Nye Tenerelli, advisor Dr. Thomas Tenerelli. The agenda. First, I'm going to talk about Shake Shack and then its growth potential. And finally, I'm going to cover the financial model and evaluation. About Shake Shack. Shake Shack is a largely sit-down restaurant chain based in New York that specializes in burgers, hot dogs, fries, and milkshakes. Shake Shack was founded in New York in July 2004, starting as a hot dog stand. It started offering stock to the public in early 2014, and Shake Shack is increasingly moving into the fast food segment with the construction of drive-through windows. In 2016, Shake Shack became very popular, bringing huge lines that showed up all over the news. There are 308 system-wide Shake Shack locations in 30 states and 15 countries. The restaurant is very popular, and the company has been successful at replicating the concept in other states and countries. The company is part of the growing segment of gourmet hamburger general fast food chains that are rapidly growing across the country. A New York Times article published in February 2012 characterized Shake Shack's success as follows. From its origins as a hot dog cart at the restaurant Danny Meyer's set up as a kind of art project in 2001, Shake Shack has become one of the most influential restaurants of the last decade, studied and copied around the country. Its legacy can be seen not just in the stampede of good, cheap burgers, but in the growing recognition that certain fine dining values like caring service and premium ingredients can be profitably applied outside fine dining, all the way down the scale to the most debased restaurant genre of all, the fast food outlet. Gourmet burger, or Shake Shack model. Gourmet burgers, entry point burgers start around $5 and most cost $79. They use fresh ingredients, responding to customer demand for quality, and have vegetarian options such as shrooms on hamburgers. Excellent customer service, employees are happy and customers are happy. Shake Shack competitors. Well-known competitors are A&W, Burger King, Carl's Jr., Checkers, Rallies, Dairy Queen, Hardee's, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, Sonic, Wendy's, and White Castle. There are many competitors when it comes to burger-focused food chains, but not all have similar prices / quality. Competitors with similar quality and prices include Culver's, Five Guys, In-N-Out, Habitat Burger, Red Robin, Smash Burger, Steak and Shake, and Whataburger. Which burger is best? In an article of the top 22 burger chains, Shake Shack took first place, In-N-Out took second, and taking the number 3 spot was Steak and Shake. There's a reason it's continuously ranked as the best burger spot in the country. While the restaurant has plenty of yummy items on their menu, hot dogs, frozen custard, and fries, their burgers are top notch. Which burger is best? Part 2. In another contest between In-N-Out, Five Guys, and Shake Shack again won thanks to the quality of its beef patty. The flavor and texture of the beef patty is second to none, with an intense beefiness and cooking method designed to maximize browning and thus our carnal pleasure. Yes, their toppings and bun are great, but at the Shack, it's all about the beef. When it comes down to it, the 3 sandwiches are all great and all completely different beefs. The In-N-Out burger is really more about the total burger experience. Which burger is best? Part 3. In an article by the New York Eater, Shake Shack came in at 6th place in New York City. No other national or regional restaurant chain made the top 24. Another quote, it is also arguably defined the New York style of burger, griddle cooked American cheese topped patties served on potato rolls, greasy as hell, but delicious. Strong Shake Shack growth the past 5 years. The blue line is sales, how much they've made, how much they've sold. The blue line is how much they make, and the orange line is how much they make divided by the shares. Potential for growth. Shake Shack is a premium brand and consistently the highest ranked burger chain in the country and world. Innovative menu including non-dairy chocolate shakes and frozen custard, the veggie burger, the veggie shack, the crispy shallot burger, the shroom burger, and the falafel shack mina. Has an emphasis on sustainability throughout the store operation and design, and the company is committed to having a positive social impact throughout diversity and equality and equity and inclusion. Potential for growth. Shake Shack has had consistent stable growth in stores. Shake Shack has a history of consistently opening successful new stores in different locations around the country and world, expanding digital channels, meaning the Shake Shack app and orders from their website. 8 of 10 directors are independent, and strong industry growth in sales. Here are some strong restaurant industry sales growth for the past 50 years, only going up to 2017. Risks. The hamburger market is getting increasingly crowded, and there are many new entrants into the gourmet hamburger segment. May not be able to continue to replicate success with store openings in new markets. Continued negative impacts of COVID on margins through reduction in same-store sales, particularly in urban areas due to decreased travel, though that is coming back. Risks. Delayed openings of new stores due to COVID, related supply chain issues, and an increasingly challenging real estate environment. Delays in permitting, construction, landlord readiness, and equipment availability remain intense and in many instances are impacting planned opening timelines. The COVID lockdown and intermittent market interruptions across China are impacting near-term licensing revenue, creating uncertainty for this important market for the foreseeable future. Shake Shack directors, incentives aligned. The board of directors offers advice and guidance to the CEO and also oversees the CEO on behalf of the shareholder and has the power to fire the CEO. 8 of 10 members of the board of directors are independent. Chair of board is not the CEO, and the chair of the board is a significant shareholder. Shake Shack Board of Directors. Insider holdings. Chairman of the board is a significant shareholder. The chairman of the board is a significant shareholder owning almost 2 million shares. CEO owns just under 100,000 shares. Analyst estimates. Oh wait, no, you can skip this one. Analyst ratings and price targets. The recommended rating, you can see it's between buy and hold. Analyst price targets, out of 18 analysts, the high was 86, the low was 45, and the average was 67, but it's currently at 43. And at the recommended trends for March and April is mainly hold, but now it's kind of evened out through everything. Stock price chart through the past 7 years, 2015 to 2022. Conclusion of model, Shake Shack valuation. Estimated per share value based on discounted cash flow analysis and reasonable assumption is $42. Current stock price is $44. Downward price potential 3%. Assumptions. Revenue grows at current rates until reaching 2,000 stores, currently having about 400. McDonald's has, or evidence to back this up, is McDonald's has 44,000 stores worldwide, and Shake Shack has approximately half as many stores in New York, their home market compared to McDonald's. And profit margins return to pre-COVID levels. Questions? Yeah. I just thought it was an interesting store. Yeah, I don't really have a great reason. Can you say that again? All right. All right, thank you very much. Any others? I think so, but you don't have to. Yep. Yes. No, not really. Though they are creating a lot of new stores, especially drive-through windows. Any others? All right, thank you very much.